Why did an invisible hand write a cryptic message on a palace wall in a language no one could read, except one man? Why wasn't that same man torn apart when he was thrown into a den of starving lions? Could it be that Daniel wasn't just wise, but chosen for something far beyond his time? From fiery furnaces that couldn't burn, to angelic beings revealing the end of the world, Daniel's life is not just a tale of survival. It's a divine mystery wrapped in prophetic fire. And the deeper you go, the more you'll realize. This story isn't just about the past. It's about what's still coming. Welcome to Bible Talescapes, where scripture comes alive in ways you've never imagined. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay with us till the end. Because the story of Daniel might just explain the future you're living in now. The sun was setting over Jerusalem, bleeding gold across the horizon. Yet the air was thick with dread. It was 605 BC, and the city, once full of songs, sacrifices, and the sound of priests in the temple, now echoed with the rumble of foreign chariots. The Babylonians had come. Not just any soldiers, but warriors of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Their iron-armored horses pawed at the sacred soil of Judah, and their king, Nebuchadnezzar, had only one goal: conquest. In the midst of the chaos, a teenage boy named Daniel stood still. His robes were torn, his hands bound, but his spirit was not. He was only about 15 or 16 years old, yet the calm in his eyes made him look older. He wasn't alone. Around him were other youths from noble families, all chosen not for their weapons, but for their wisdom. They were strong, intelligent, and handsome, carefully selected for Babylon's elite training program. Among them were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who would later be known by names you'll never forget: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel didn't cry. He didn't plead. As the smoke of the temple rose in the distance, his beloved city now desecrated, he closed his eyes and whispered the Shema. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." That prayer, that quiet allegiance, would soon clash with the darkest powers of the most pagan empire on earth. The journey to Babylon was brutal. Days turned to weeks, and the heat was merciless. Some prisoners collapsed. Others went mad. But Daniel kept his mind sharp. He studied the faces of the soldiers. He listened to their language. He observed the cruelty of their customs. Babylon, they said, was a land of gods and magic, of giant ziggurats and golden idols. There, your name could be changed, your God forgotten, and your will broken. But Daniel made up his mind that his identity would never be rewritten, no matter what the empire tried. When they arrived at the gates of Babylon, it was unlike anything Daniel had ever imagined. The city towered with walls over 300 feet high. Enormous statues of strange beasts lined the streets. Temples to gods like Marduk and Bel were everywhere, filled with gold stolen from Jerusalem's temple. The infamous Ishtar Gate loomed before them, decorated with lions and bulls, symbols of Babylon's unshakable power. This wasn't just a city. It was a declaration of war against the God of Israel. The captives were marched into the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. There, the royal official Ashpenaz inspected them. He gave them Babylonian names. Daniel became Belteshazzar, a name that honored a demon god. It was a subtle strategy. Change their names, change their gods. But inside, Daniel still heard the voice of Yahweh calling him by his real name, Daniel, which means God is my judge. Daniel and his friends were then enrolled in a 3-year training program designed to erase every trace of their Hebrew identity. They were taught astronomy, magic, mathematics, history, and most dangerously, Babylonian theology. The curriculum wasn't just education, it was indoctrination. Every lesson was a seed of rebellion against the God of their fathers. But Daniel didn't resist with fists or rebellion. He fought with wisdom, silence, and unwavering conviction. Every night, when others slept, Daniel prayed toward Jerusalem. His hands shook, his voice trembled, but his prayers pierced heaven. He asked not just for survival, but for purpose. Why was he here? Why him? And in those quiet moments, he began to understand. This exile wasn't a punishment. It was a platform. God had placed him inside the most powerful kingdom on earth to display his own power. Even in captivity, God was still writing the story. The tension in the palace rose when Daniel and his friends were offered the king's food, meat and wine from Nebuchadnezzar's table. Most would have seen it as a blessing, a privilege. But Daniel knew the truth. That food had been sacrificed to idols, blessed in the name of pagan gods. Eating it would be an act of worship to demons. Quietly, Daniel stepped forward and requested something unthinkable. "Please, give us vegetables and water instead." Ashpenaz stared in disbelief. "Are you trying to get yourself killed? You'll look sickly, and I'll be blamed." But Daniel replied with calm confidence. "Test us for 10 days. Compare us with the others. See for yourself." The deal was made. For 10 days, Daniel and his friends ate nothing but simple vegetables and drank water while everyone else feasted. Yet when the 10 days were up, they didn't look weak. They looked stronger, sharper, healthier. The guards were stunned. God had honored Daniel's quiet defiance. From that moment on, the food of idols never touched his lips again. 3 years passed. Daniel and his friends excelled beyond all the other trainees. They understood riddles no one else could solve. They mastered languages in weeks. Even the king was amazed. When Nebuchadnezzar interviewed them, he found them 10 times wiser than the most seasoned sorcerers in his empire. Daniel didn't just survive Babylon. He thrived in it. And not because he became like them, but because he remained true to his God. But this was just the beginning. Deep within Nebuchadnezzar's heart, pride was building like a storm. His dreams had begun to trouble him. He sensed that Babylon's power wasn't eternal, that something greater was watching. A storm was coming. A spiritual war was about to break loose in the very heart of the empire. And when that storm hit, Daniel would be the only one who could face it. The laughter of foreign tongues echoed off the marble walls of Babylon's elite academy. Gold bowls clinked with roasted meats drenched in wine. Spiced bread filled the air with temptation, and incense coiled upward from pagan altars like invisible serpents. At the center of it all sat tables overflowing with the king's food, lavish, intoxicating, and forbidden. Daniel sat quietly at one of the long tables, his hands resting beside an untouched plate. A servant had just poured him wine imported from Phoenicia. The aroma was rich, intoxicating, but to Daniel it smelled like betrayal. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply watched the wine swirl and drip into the polished goblet, like the blood of every sacred thing Babylon had consumed. To most of the other Judean captives, this was survival. But Daniel saw something deeper. This wasn't just a meal. It was a test of identity, of loyalty, of who still belonged to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and who had already bowed to Babylon without ever kneeling. Beside him sat Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, their eyes sharp, their resolve firm. They hadn't spoken a word about the food, not because they weren't thinking, but because they were watching Daniel. He was their unspoken leader, though no crown rested on his head. His silence had a kind of gravity, and when he finally moved, so did they. That evening, Daniel did something most would consider political suicide. He requested a private audience with Ashpenaz, the chief eunuch in charge of their training. A powerful official, deeply loyal to Nebuchadnezzar, and not known for his patience. Ashpenaz eyed the teenager before him. "You've impressed many, Belteshazzar. But this request, it could cost you your life. The food comes from the king's own table. It's the finest in the world." Daniel bowed respectfully but didn't back down. "With all honor, sir, our bodies are sacred. We cannot defile ourselves with food that's been offered to Babylonian gods." Ashpenaz narrowed his gaze. "And if you grow weak, if your face looks sicklier than the others, Nebuchadnezzar will blame me. He'll have my head." Daniel's answer was calm but edged with divine boldness. "Then test us. 10 days. Give us only vegetables to eat and water to drink. After that, compare us to the others. If we fail, do as you must. But let us prove that our God is still with us, even here." The eunuch hesitated, but something in Daniel's eyes, something ancient and unshakable, convinced him. He agreed. But not without warning. 10 days. Not a day more. As night fell, word spread among the Babylonian trainees. The Hebrews had rejected the king's food. Some mocked. Others whispered in awe. To the sorcerers in training, it was madness. To the astrologers, it was insult. But to the watchers in the unseen realm, the angels and demons silently observing, this quiet rebellion rang like thunder. Every meal thereafter, Daniel and his friends sat with bowls of lentils, grains, and vegetables. No roasted meat. No rich sauces. No fruit-drenched wines. The servants sneered. The officials watched. But Daniel prayed before every bite, not for favor but for strength to never compromise. By the 7th day, even the other Hebrew youths noticed a difference. While others struggled with Babylon's rich food, waking sluggish, bloated, or sick, Daniel and his companions rose early, prayed longer, studied harder. Their minds were crisp, their eyes sharp, their energy unwavering. On the 10th day, Ashpenaz arrived with his personal physician. His face betrayed his expectation of failure. But when he saw Daniel and the others, he froze. Their faces glowed with health. Their eyes were clear. Their skin was vibrant. They looked radiant. "Impossible," the physician whispered. "No wine? No meat." Daniel simply bowed. "We've been eating what God made for us since Eden." From that day forward, Ashpenaz allowed them to continue their diet. The Royal Academy adjusted their records. Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had passed Babylon's first trial not with swords, but with self-discipline. Not by storming palaces, but by mastering their appetites. It was a victory invisible to most, but in the courts of heaven, it was recorded in fire. What no one knew yet, what even Daniel didn't realize, was that this test was a foundation. God had to train his vessel in private obedience before placing him on the public stage. A time was coming when Daniel would stand before kings, interpret dreams that would shake empires, and outlive for pagan administrations. But it all began with a plate of vegetables and a decision made in secret. Meanwhile, deep within the royal palace, Nebuchadnezzar began to dream. Not just ordinary dreams, but visions so vivid, so terrifying, that he woke drenched in sweat. He began to suspect that Babylon's strength would not last forever. And the name Belteshazzar began to stir in his royal memory. A storm was coming, and Daniel was being prepared for it. Before we go deeper, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? We love seeing how far God's word is traveling. It began in the silence of midnight. The flickering torchlight in King Nebuchadnezzar's private chambers cast long shadows against the ornate walls. Babylon slept under the watchful gaze of its massive ziggurats, its citizens lulled by the hum of river winds. But in the palace, at the heart of the world's most powerful empire, the king could not sleep. Nebuchadnezzar was no ordinary ruler. He had conquered Jerusalem, crushed Egypt's resistance, and forged Babylon into the golden head of civilization. Yet tonight, a dream gripped him with terror, more vivid than memory, more real than reality. His bed, draped in fine Assyrian linen, offered no comfort. The dream returned again and again, the same towering figure, the same brilliance, the same violent destruction. He sat up, gasping. Sweat poured down his temples. His hands trembled. He was the king of kings in the known world, but something in this dream made him feel small. By morning, the palace exploded with noise. Royal messengers sprinted down corridors. Drummers beat out summons. Across the city, the magicians, sorcerers, Chaldeans, and astrologers, the king's spiritual elite, were dragged from their sleep and hauled into the throne room. They arrived to find Nebuchadnezzar pacing furiously. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice sharp enough to wound. "I've had a dream," he declared, "and my spirit is troubled to know what it means." The Chaldeans bowed deeply, confident. "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will declare the interpretation." But Nebuchadnezzar's eyes burned with suspicion. He had been surrounded by manipulators for years. He had seen them twist omens, invent meanings, and flatter with empty visions. This time he wanted certainty. "No," he growled. "You shall tell me the dream and its interpretation. If you don't, you'll be torn limb from limb and your houses made ruins." Gasps echoed across the marble floors. Even the oldest among the Chaldeans had never faced such a demand. "O king," they pleaded, "no man on earth can do what you ask. Only the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh." Nebuchadnezzar's face darkened like a storm. Rage surged. He struck the throne with his scepter. "Then what use are you? You claim to speak with gods. And now you confess your weakness? Guards, kill them all. Every wise man in Babylon. I want their heads before nightfall." That command raced through the capital like wildfire. Soldiers began raiding homes, dragging out scholars, scribes, and dream readers. And among those labeled wise men, though he had never been summoned to the throne that morning, was Daniel. As the commander of the king's guard, Arioch, entered Daniel's quarters to execute the decree, Daniel raised a calm hand. "Why is the king's decree so urgent?" he asked, his voice composed. Arioch paused. Daniel didn't panic. He didn't beg. His presence was unervingly steady, like a tree in storm. "Tell the king," Daniel said, "to give me time, and I will show him the dream and the interpretation." It was an outrageous claim, but Arioch had heard rumors of Daniel's wisdom, how even the chief eunuch spoke of him with reverence. And something about Daniel's eyes, clear, focused, fearless, made the commander agree. Daniel returned to his chamber and gathered Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The 4 young men knelt on the floor. No feast, no comfort, no plan, just prayer. They didn't demand. They didn't panic. They pleaded for mercy from the God of heaven, for understanding, for revelation, for the impossible. That night, in the stillness of Daniel's sleep, God answered. In a vision, the dream unfolded before him. He saw it, the colossal statue radiant and terrifying, a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, feet mingled with clay. Then a stone, uncut by human hands, came crashing down, shattering the statue into dust. The wind blew it all away, and the stone grew into a mountain that filled the earth. Daniel awoke breathless, but not afraid. He immediately fell to his knees. "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever," he whispered, eyes moist with awe. "For wisdom and might are his. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He reveals deep and secret things. And he has made known to me what we asked." At dawn, Daniel requested to see Arioch again, this time with a bold message. "Take me to the king. I have the answer." Arioch didn't hesitate. He led Daniel through the palace with urgency, past armed guards and crimson tapestries. When they entered the throne room, Nebuchadnezzar sat rigid on his throne, his crown slightly askew. Sleeplessness and fury had aged him overnight. "Are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation?" he demanded. Daniel stepped forward, not in pride, but with divine weight behind his words. "No wise man, astrologer, magician, or soothsayer can reveal what the king has asked," he began. The room tensed. But then Daniel continued, voice resonating like thunder beneath still water. "But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets." And then Daniel began to speak the dream aloud. Every detail, every image, as if he had been inside the king's mind. Nebuchadnezzar leaned forward, stunned. His mouth parted. His hands clutched the throne arms. "That was my dream," he whispered. "Exactly." Daniel did not stop. "You, O king, are the head of gold. But after you shall arise another kingdom, inferior to yours. Then a third of bronze. Then a fourth strong as iron. And finally a divided kingdom, partly strong, partly fragile. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed." The words hung in the air like divine thunder. Nebuchadnezzar fell from his throne and bowed face down before Daniel, a teenage exile, a foreigner. He declared, "Truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets. Daniel was promoted immediately, made ruler over the province of Babylon and chief over all its wise men. He requested that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah be elevated with him. The 4 Hebrews, once captives, now stood at the epicenter of world power. But even as Babylon cheered and Daniel rose in rank, a darker storm brewed in the king's heart. He had seen the image shattered. He had heard of other kingdoms rising after his. And Nebuchadnezzar would not accept that fate. Soon, his pride would spark a challenge, a fiery confrontation that would draw all eyes to a furnace, and a God who walks with men through fire. The city of Babylon stirred at the break of dawn with a new rhythm. Daniel was no longer just a name among exiles. He was now ruler over the entire province of Babylon, a foreigner placed above native advisors, with power bestowed by the very throne that once threatened his life. From palace scholars to military governors, whispers of Daniel's divine wisdom echoed through every sandstone alley and temple corridor. But while Daniel remained in the palace, he did not rise alone. At his request, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his 3 companions in faith, were placed as administrators over Babylon's affairs. Unlike Daniel, they stepped out into the city's heart, inspecting roads, managing supplies, regulating justice. Their new roles gave them visibility, responsibility, and, most dangerously, enemies. Because not everyone in Babylon was pleased to see Hebrew captives in positions once held by proud Chaldeans. Beneath smiles and courteous nods, envy festered. But what no one foresaw was how that envy would soon collide with a king's pride, and how a statue would become the battleground of belief. Months passed. The terror of Nebuchadnezzar's dream dulled with time. Babylon's walls were growing taller, its gardens greener, its temples richer. And in that flourishing of success, a dangerous seed began to grow in the king's heart: defiance. His dream had shown a statue with a head of gold himself, but a body that continued into other kingdoms. That prophecy, though spoken by a Hebrew prophet, unsettled him. Why should Babylon ever fall? Why should his name not endure forever? So, the king made a decision not of wisdom, but of rebellion. He would reshape the dream, but on his own terms. He would build the statue again, not as God had shown him, but in his own image, and this time not just the head, but the entire form in gold. It was not just a monument. It was a declaration. My kingdom will not end. My word is final. My power is eternal. Construction began immediately on the Duraplain, a wide-open expanse just outside the capital. Thousands of laborers, engineers, and artists worked around the clock under armed supervision. The golden statue, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, rose like a beacon of human arrogance against the desert sky. It glittered under the sun, casting its shadow far across the plain. And at its base, a massive platform was built, not just for admiration but for worship. Soon, messengers were dispatched across every province of the empire. From Ethiopia to India, from Egypt to Assyria, officials, governors, magistrates, counselors, and tribal leaders were summoned to Babylon. The king's decree was clear. At the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, psaltery, and all kinds of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever refuses will be immediately thrown into a blazing furnace. The day arrived. An ocean of nobles, dressed in silks, jewels, and armors from 100 nations, gathered before the statue. Trumpets blared. Flags of Babylon waved in the wind. And above them all, on a golden platform, Nebuchadnezzar stood, smiling, his eyes gleaming with self-made divinity. In the crowd, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah stood shoulder to shoulder, the only ones not kneeling. The instruments sounded. A wave of motion rippled across the plain. Tens of thousands dropped to their knees in mechanical obedience. Some bowed out of fear, others out of loyalty. Many did not even understand what the image was. They bowed because everyone else did. But the 3 Hebrews remained upright, still, unshaken, like iron pillars among a sea of bending reeds. They did not whisper, protest, or explain themselves. Their silence was loud. Their stance was sharper than any sword. They were seen, not by the king, but by men whose hearts were already poisoned with jealousy, Chaldean nobles who had never accepted the rise of these Hebrew administrators. They approached the throne with haste and venom. "O king, live forever," they said with smiles. "Didn't you decree that everyone should bow at the sound of music or be cast into the fire?" Nebuchadnezzar narrowed his eyes. "Yes. Well, there are certain Jews whom you've placed over the affairs of Babylon who did not bow. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image you've set up." The king's mood shifted like lightning. His face twisted in fury. His voice thundered across the plain. "Bring them to me. Now!" Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were escorted through the crowd. They did not resist. They did not tremble. Their eyes were steady, their steps firm. Before the king they stood with dignity. "Is it true," Nebuchadnezzar roared, "that you refuse to serve my gods or worship the golden image I have set up? I'll give you one more chance. When the music plays, fall down and worship, or you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And who is the God who can deliver you out of my hands?" The crowd held its breath. This was no longer about policy, it was personal, a direct challenge to the throne, and to the king's ego. Then came one of the boldest replies ever uttered by mortal lips. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us from your hand. But even if he doesn't, know this, we will not serve your gods or worship the image you have set up." The silence that followed was thicker than the desert heat. The king's fury erupted. "Heat the furnace 7 times hotter." Soldiers rushed to obey. Flames leapt higher. The smell of oil and burning coals filled the air. The fire became so intense that even the guards who carried the 3 men were consumed by the heat as they tossed them in. The crowd turned their faces, expecting the screams of death. But then, a soundless gasp rippled through those watching. Eyes widened, fingers pointed. Nebuchadnezzar leaned forward, his jaw dropping. "Wait! Didn't we throw 3 men into the fire?" The counselor beside him nodded quickly. "Certainly, O king." "Then why?" Nebuchadnezzar whispered, rising to his feet. "Do I see 4 men walking in the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods?" The flames had no power over them. Not a hair on their heads was singed. Their clothes were untouched. The only things burned were the ropes that once bound them. And the 4th? He did not speak. He did not move to be recognized. But his presence, divine, luminous, majestic, made the fire feel like a sanctuary. Nebuchadnezzar rushed to the mouth of the furnace and cried out, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out." They stepped out, not limping, not coughing, not even smelling of smoke. Babylon's rulers crowded around them in stunned silence. The laws of nature had been reversed. The pride of the empire had been shaken. And Nebuchadnezzar this time praised, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. No other God can save like this." He issued a new decree. No one in the empire may speak against the God of the Hebrews, or they will be cut to pieces. And he promoted the 3 men to even higher positions. But the fire was not the end. It was only a warning, for pride still lurked in the king's heart, and a far more personal test of power was coming. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to become part of this growing Bible Tales Capes family. We're building a powerful community rooted in God's truth. Time marched forward in Babylon, but though the fires of the furnace had cooled, the embers of pride still smoldered in King Nebuchadnezzar's heart. The golden image was no longer the object of worship, but the king's self-glorification had merely changed shape, like a serpent shedding its skin, only to grow more dangerous. The empire had grown more prosperous than ever. Markets buzzed, walls stretched, rivers obeyed engineering feats that made Babylon a wonder of the world. But all this, in Nebuchadnezzar's eyes, was his doing. He had conquered nations, ruled men like chess pieces, and dictated destinies with a flick of his hand. And though he had once praised the God of Daniel, in time, that awe withered under the weight of his own throne. But the Most High God never forgets a man he warns, and he always finishes what he starts. It began again with a dream, not the kind that vanishes with morning, but the kind that clings to your bones, the kind that wakes you trembling in sweat, unable to breathe, because you've seen something eternal and it saw you too. Nebuchadnezzar called again for his seers, magicians, and wise men. They came with incense, scrolls, and charms. But as before, none could unlock the vision's meaning. It mocked them with its silence. And so the king, humbled but not yet broken, summoned Daniel, the one in whom he said, dwells the spirit of the holy gods. He recounted the dream. I saw a tree in the middle of the earth. It was enormous, its top reached to the heavens. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and every creature found shelter under it. But then a holy watcher, a messenger from heaven, came down with a command. Cut it down, strip its branches, scatter its fruit. Let the beast be drenched in dew, and his mind be changed from that of a man to that of a beast, until 7 times pass over him. When he finished speaking, Daniel fell silent. Not from confusion, but from grief. His face paled, his eyes lowered. This was not a mystery, it was a judgment, one that would shake the core of a kingdom. "O king," Daniel finally said, "if only the dream applied to your enemies, but it did not. You, O king, are the tree. Great, tall, strong, you have ruled over nations. But because your heart has been lifted in pride, you will be cut down. You will be driven away from men. You will live with wild beasts, eat grass like cattle. Your kingdom will be taken from you, until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men." The court fell silent. But Daniel, with courage burning beneath his sorrow, added a plea. "Therefore, O king, break off your sins by being righteous. Show mercy to the oppressed. Perhaps your prosperity may be prolonged." The words echoed in Nebuchadnezzar's mind, but not for long. Time passed. A full year came and went. The sky remained blue. His throne remained firm. And so he forgot. One day, the king stood atop the roof of his royal palace. The city below glittered like a jewel. And he said aloud, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power for the glory of my majesty?" But even before the sentence had finished leaving his lips, a voice from heaven thundered, "O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom is departed from you." In a moment, reason snapped like a bowstring. The scepter fell from his hand. The crown tumbled from his head. His servants fled in terror as the king, once the most powerful man on earth, began to crawl on all fours, wild and unrecognizable. He was driven from men. He lived among the beasts. The dew soaked his skin. His hair grew like eagle feathers. His nails curled like bird claws. He grazed like an ox, roaming fields instead of ruling halls. For 7 years, Babylon had a madman for a king. But no one dared overthrow him, because even in madness, God protected what he promised to restore. And in the 7th year, as suddenly as it left, his sanity returned. He lifted his eyes to heaven, not as a conqueror, but as a man crushed into humility. "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol the King of heaven, for all his works are truth, and his ways justice." He was restored, his throne reinstated, but this time his pride left in the dust. His tale was recorded for generations, a pagan king who became the mouthpiece of God's glory. But Babylon's story did not end with Nebuchadnezzar. For the golden lion had a cub, Belshazzar, his descendant, who did not learn from history, but chose to mock it. When Nebuchadnezzar's life ended in honor, Belshazzar began his reign with drunken foolishness. He was young, rich, and reckless, and worst of all, he was surrounded by flatterers who fed his arrogance. It was the night of a royal festival. Thousands of lords and concubines gathered in the palace banquet hall. Music pulsed, laughter echoed, wine poured like rivers, and Belshazzar, intoxicated with both wine and vanity, commanded something no king before him dared. "Bring the golden vessels, those taken from the temple of the Hebrews in Jerusalem." Let us drink from them in celebration of the gods of gold, silver, and stone." Servants rushed to obey. The sacred vessels, once used by priests before the Ark of the Covenant, were now passed between lustful hands. Wine sloshed over holy edges. Pagans toasted to idols using cups crafted for Yahweh. It was blasphemy layered upon blasphemy. And then it happened. A moment so terrifying, it turned wine to ash in their throats. On the far wall of the great hall, opposite the torchlight and tapestries, a hand appeared. Just a hand. Not attached to a body. No voice. No face. Just fingers of flame that etched glowing letters into the plaster wall. In complete silence. The room froze. The harp stopped. The laughter died. Belshazzar's face turned chalk-white. His knees knocked together. He clutched the throne as though it could anchor him to reality. The writing read, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. None understood it. None dared interpret it. The magicians were called, but they offered only fear and riddles. And so, as dread rippled through the court, the Queen Mother entered the room. With a calm voice that cut through panic, she spoke of a man named Daniel, once chief of the wise men under Nebuchadnezzar. He has the spirit of the holy gods. Call him. Daniel was summoned, older now, gray in beard, but sharper in spirit than ever. Belshazzar tried to bait him with gifts. Interpret this, and I'll clothe you in purple, place a gold chain around your neck, and make you third ruler in the kingdom. But Daniel's eyes did not flinch. Keep your gifts. Give your rewards to another. But I will read the writing. He turned to the wall. The hand had vanished, but the letters remained like judgment etched into time. God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Daniel turned to the trembling king. You knew all that your father, Nebuchadnezzar, suffered. You knew how he was humbled, and yet you lifted yourself against the Lord of heaven. You brought his holy vessels here, praised idols, and dishonored the living God. You have been judged. That very night, as Babylon slept in drunken stupor, Persian soldiers breached the walls through the dried riverbed of the Euphrates. There was no battle, no defense. Belshazzar was slain in his chambers, and Daniel, again, survived the fall of an empire, because kingdoms rise and fall, but those who walk with God walk through fire, madness, and war untouched. The gold of Babylon had barely cooled when the silver of Persia rose in its place. The Medes and the Persians swept into power with quiet dominance, led by Darius the Mede, a ruler known for order, precision, and law, and a heart that could still be moved by righteousness. As the dust of conquest settled, Darius reorganized his empire with strict efficiency. He appointed 120 satraps to govern the provinces and placed 3 governors above them. Among the 3, one name stood out not for his heritage or bloodline, but for his unshakable excellence. Daniel. Though now aged, Daniel's wisdom had not faded. His integrity was untouched. He carried scars from empires past, but his spirit burned even brighter. As he took his place among the ruling elite of a new world order, it became clear that Daniel was not merely surviving. He was rising again. The scrolls recorded that Darius considered setting Daniel over the entire kingdom, a role only beneath the throne itself. But where favor grows, so does envy. The other governors and satraps seethed. Daniel's faith, his honesty, his unwavering service. It exposed their corruption like sunlight against mold. They watched, whispered, and plotted. But try as they might, they could find no error, no negligence, no scandal. So they crafted a weapon more sinister, his faith. They knew Daniel's rhythm like clockwork. 3 times a day without fail, he opened his window toward Jerusalem, dropped to his knees and prayed. Not to Persia's gods, but to the God of heaven. A habit so consistent it became his signature. And so, with flattery sharpened like a blade, the satraps came before King Darius with a cunning proposal cloaked in loyalty. O king, live forever. We, the governors, counselors, and satraps, have agreed. Let a royal statute be established, that for 30 days, no one shall petition any god or man except you, O king. Whoever disobeys shall be thrown into the den of lions. If this story is blessing you so far, like the video and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth of God's word today. Let's light up more hearts with his message. It was a trap. But Darius, caught in the web of pride and praise, signed the decree into law, a law of the Medes and Persians, which could not be revoked. And Daniel? He heard it. He read the decree. The consequences were clear, but nothing changed. He climbed the stairs to his room. He opened his window facing the ruins of Jerusalem. And as before, he knelt. Not once, not twice, but 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks, just as he had always done. Not even the smell of lions could bend the knees of a man whose faith was anchored in eternity. The conspirators struck immediately. They burst into his chamber, caught him in prayer, and hurried to the king. Not with joy, but with smug satisfaction. O king, did you not sign a law that anyone who prays to a god besides you shall be thrown into the lion's den? Darius's heart stopped. They had baited him, and the trap had sprung, not on Daniel but on the king's own conscience. He labored all day to find a way out. He consulted laws, advisors, scrolls, but the decree stood. By evening, the pressure of empire and law crushed his resistance. They brought Daniel, bound yet calm. Darius looked into the eyes of the man he respected most and whispered with a voice thick with sorrow, "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." Then the stone door opened, and Daniel was lowered into the den. The lions, starved, restless, claws like razors and breath like smoke, watched. The stone was rolled shut. The king sealed it with his ring and the rings of his lords, not to keep Daniel in, but to keep meddling men out. And then Darius returned to his palace. But he could not eat. He could not sleep. He could not forget. He fasted in silence, tormented by the weight of what had been done. But in the den below there was no fear. There were lions. There was darkness. But there was also an angel, sent by the Lord of hosts. The angel stood between fang and flesh, and he closed the mouths of the beasts with divine authority. Their growls fell silent, their rage subdued. The Lion of the tribe of Judah had claimed the den as his sanctuary. And Daniel? He slept, surrounded by death, yet untouched, wrapped in peace not of this world. At dawn, before the sun rose, the king ran. He threw aside his crown, his robes, his dignity. Breathless, he reached the mouth of the den and cried out, not in command, but in desperation, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" A pause, a heartbeat, then a voice echoed from the shadows below, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no wrong." Tears streamed from the king's eyes. Joy erupted like a flood. He ordered Daniel lifted out. And behold, not a single scratch was found on him, not even a broken thread of his robe. But justice was not yet done. The king turned to the schemers, the liars, the wolves in robes who plotted against the innocent. And he commanded their punishment. They and their families were thrown into the same den they had designed for Daniel. And before they reached the floor, the lions broke their bones in pieces. The silence was gone. The den had become what it was meant to be, a place of justice. And Darius, now shaken with reverence, made a decree that echoed through the empire. "In every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and steadfast forever. His kingdom shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be unto the end. He delivers and rescues, and works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions." And so Daniel prospered again, under kings through laws beyond threats, because his life was hidden in the hands of a God who tames beasts, topples empires, and honors those who dare to remain faithful even in the jaws of death. Long after the lion's growls had faded into legend and the empire settled into the rhythm of Persian rule, Daniel's nights began to tremble. He was older now, gray streaking his beard, his shoulders weighed with years of service. Yet instead of fading into rest, his spirit was pulled into a realm more terrifying than any earthly threat, the unseen world of divine prophecy. It began in the first year of Belshazzar's reign, before the banquet of doom, before the handwriting on the wall, when the city of Babylon still glittered in arrogant pride. One night, as the world slumbered beneath moonlight, Daniel was taken in a vision, not by chariot or wings, but by the hand of revelation itself. He saw the great sea, its waters churned by the four winds of heaven, wild, violent, and unrelenting. And from that boiling abyss, four monstrous beasts emerged, each more terrifying than the last. The first was like a lion, but it had eagle's wings. As Daniel watched, its wings were plucked, and it was lifted from the ground and made to stand like a man. Its heart changed. The second, a bear, rose up on one side, with 3 ribs clenched between its teeth, and a voice thundered from nowhere. "Arise, devour much flesh." The third was a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, a creature too fast, too many-eyed, too cunning for any prey to outrun. But it was the fourth beast that made Daniel's bones quake. It had no comparison in the animal kingdom. It was not lion, nor bear, nor serpent. It was a thing of iron and chaos, with teeth like jagged metal, and 10 horns that jutted from its skull like crowns of tyranny. As Daniel stared, another horn, smaller and sinister, grew among them, displacing 3. This horn had eyes like a man and a mouth that boasted blasphemy, as though it dared to challenge heaven itself. Daniel's breath caught. He couldn't blink. He couldn't move. But then the scene shifted. From chaos, the vision rose into order. He saw thrones set in place, not built by human hands, but descending from eternity. And one took his seat, ancient and unmeasurable. His clothing was white as snow, his hair like pure wool. His throne was a flame of fire, and its wheels burned with holy light. A river of fire flowed from before him, and thousands upon thousands ministered to him, while 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, silent, trembling, waiting for the court to convene. And the books were opened. Then came judgment. The boasting horn's voice was silenced. The fourth beast was slain, its body destroyed and thrown into the flames. The other beasts had their dominion stripped, though they were allowed to live for a season. And in that sacred hush, Daniel beheld the greatest wonder of all. "I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. To him was given dominion, and glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one, that shall never be destroyed." Daniel awoke sweating, gasping, drenched in awe and fear. The vision haunted him. It pierced him deeper than lion's teeth or fiery flames. He did not rush to explain it. He sealed it in his heart, trembling at the weight of what had been revealed. But it would not be the last. In the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign, as the world remained oblivious to its prophetic countdown, Daniel found himself again transported into vision, this time to the citadel of Shushan by the river Ulai. And there he saw a ram, powerful and aggressive, with 2 horns, one higher than the other. It charged west, north, and south, and no beast could stand against it. Until a goat came from the west, so fast its hooves did not touch the ground. It had a notable horn between its eyes, and with violent fury, it shattered the ram and trampled it without mercy. The goat grew great, but in its prime the single horn was broken, and 4 notable horns rose in its place. And from one of those came a little horn, not ordinary but terrifying. It grew exceedingly great toward the south, east, and the glorious land. It exalted itself against the prince of heaven's host, halted sacrifices, and cast truth to the ground. A direct assault on heaven's order. Daniel's heart thundered. But then a holy voice pierced through. How long shall the vision be? Concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation. And the answer came like a blade drawn from heaven. Unto 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. The prophecy ended and Daniel collapsed, physically crushed by the weight of what he had seen. He lay sick for days, unable to speak of it. The visions were too real, the beasts too dreadful, the kingdoms too vast, and the rebellion too fierce. Yet he rose again. He returned to serve kings. He walked halls of power. But in his heart, Daniel now carried the blueprint of empires and the whisper of a coming king. One not born yet, but already crowned in eternity. No man around him knew what burned in his soul. No advisor could see the scrolls etched behind his eyes. But Daniel knew. The lions were not the greatest danger, nor the furnace the final test. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What part of Daniel's story spoke to you the most so far? Your insight might inspire someone else watching. The war was coming. A war of kingdoms, horns, angels, and thrones. And the visions had only just begun. The years had passed, but Daniel's soul remained stirred, tethered to mysteries no king could comprehend. The Babylon of his youth had fallen. Persia ruled now, yet Daniel stood unchanged. A servant of empires, yes, but foremost, a servant of the Most High. But on one particular day, one unlike any other, a burden pressed heavy upon his spirit. It wasn't a vision this time, not beasts nor fire nor angelic hands writing doom on the wall. It was something deeper, something human. Daniel had been reading. In the silence of his chambers, lit by a flickering oil lamp and surrounded by ancient scrolls, he came across the words of the prophet Jeremiah, prophetic ink that had long waited for his eyes. And there, in the stillness, a number surfaced like a whisper from eternity. 70 years, the desolation of Jerusalem, the exile of God's people, the judgment of a nation turned from holiness. And Daniel's heart broke. Not for himself. His wounds were many, and his age long. But for Zion, the city of his God. For the broken altars, the shattered temple, the scattered tribes of Israel, reduced to memories and fading songs. He fell to his knees. There was no audience, no royal feast, no music, just an old prophet in sackcloth and ashes, pouring out his soul before the God of Abraham. His prayer was not poetic. It was raw, a confession of national failure. We have sinned. We have rebelled. We have not listened to your servants the prophets. And as his tears soaked the earth, he wasn't asking for vengeance. He was begging for mercy. Not for our righteousness, he pleaded, but because of your great mercy. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, act. The words hung in the air, desperate, trembling. And then, before he even rose from the dust, he felt it. The air shift. Time itself pause. A presence, heavenly, overwhelming, entered his space without footsteps. And there he stood, Gabriel. Not just any messenger, but the same angel who stands in the courts of the Almighty. Swift, radiant, with eyes like eternal flame. Daniel, he said, I have now come to give you insight and understanding. The angel's voice wasn't a thunderclap. It was a calm that silenced all fear. And in that holy hush, Gabriel unveiled a revelation that would ripple through history. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city. Each week, a set of 7 years, not days. A divine calendar written in heavenly time. Gabriel spoke with precision. The time would begin from the command to restore Jerusalem. After 7 weeks and 62 weeks, a total of 69 sevens, Messiah the Prince would come. And then, shockingly, the Messiah would be cut off, seemingly without cause or inheritance. The city would again face destruction. War and desolation would persist. And in the final week, a covenant would be confirmed. But halfway through, sacrifices would cease, and abomination would fill the temple. Daniel couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about Babylon or Persia. It was about the far future. About a prince to come, one who would be killed unjustly. about a final desolation that would shake the world, about God's countdown not just for Israel, but for mankind. But Gabriel wasn't done. In the following year, during the reign of King Darius the Mede, Daniel found himself again overtaken, this time not by a vision, but by warfare in the unseen realm. He had been fasting for 21 days, no bread, no meat, no wine. His robes hung loose, his bones ached, but his spirit burned, waiting, yearning for revelation. And then, by the river Tigris, he saw another being. Not Gabriel this time. This one was clothed in linen, with a belt of pure gold, a face like lightning, eyes like flaming torches, and a voice like the roar of a multitude. Daniel collapsed as though dead. The men with him fled. The sound, the radiance, it shattered human strength. And this being spoke. "Fear not, Daniel. From the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself, your words were heard. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me." Suddenly, Daniel's mind was flung open. There were wars above the wars, kingdoms behind the kingdoms, heavenly princes locked in battle over the affairs of men. The earthly realm was only the surface. Beneath it, beyond it, was a battlefield of principalities, thrones, and dominions. What Daniel had witnessed with lions and fire were merely shadows. Now he saw the deeper war. The angel even spoke of Greece, a kingdom yet to rise, but whose prince in the unseen realm had already begun to move. Then the being gave him the prophetic map of empires yet unborn, a realm-by-realm chronicle of the north and south, kings who would rise and fall in the centuries to come, alliances and betrayals, desecrations and deliverances, all culminating in a vile king, who would exalt himself above every god, profane the covenant, and seduce with flattery those who turned from truth. But those who knew their God would be strong. They would do exploits, and though they would fall by sword, flame, and captivity, they would shine like stars forever. The vision ended, but Daniel's mission was far from over. His voice was now a reservoir of prophecy, a living scroll preserved not just for his generation, but for ours. And though he trembled, though he mourned, though he often lay weak from glory too great for mortal flesh, Daniel never turned away. The kingdoms would change, the rulers would shift, but the King of Heaven had sealed him with understanding. And in the stillness of his final years, he waited not for reward, not for glory, but for the fulfillment of the days, for the last of the 70 weeks, for the end of the story written before the world began. But we are not at the end yet. The countdown continues. The days had grown quieter. The halls of power now echoed with foreign tongues, and the prophet who once stood before Babylon's roaring kings now walked the courtyards alone, more forgotten by men than ever, but never forsaken by God. Daniel was now in his 80s or perhaps even older. His face, lined with years of heavenly visions and human sorrow, still bore the intensity of a man who had seen both lions and angels. His body had grown thin, but his spirit had become like polished gold, refined through fire, molded through obedience, and filled with mysteries only heaven could unveil. But heaven had one more to give. It came not with thunder or angelic choirs this time, but with a stillness so heavy, even time seemed to kneel. Daniel was standing near the great river Hiddekel, the Tigris, and as the wind rippled across the water, his eyes lifted and he saw him again, the man clothed in linen, belted in the gold of Upaz, eyes of fire, a face like lightning, a voice like the roar of many waters. And beside him, on either side of the river, stood two other celestial beings, one calling out in a voice that shook the air, "How long shall it be to the end of these wonders?" Then the man in linen lifted his hands, both hands, toward heaven and swore by him who lives forever, "It shall be for a time, times, and half a time." And Daniel's heart trembled, not from fear, but from a crushing awe. He had lived long enough to see Babylon fall, Persia rise, and visions fulfilled before his very eyes. But what he saw now was not of kings or empires. He saw the closing of history itself. He saw a time of trouble, unlike anything since nations began. He saw Michael, the great archangel, arise to defend God's people. He saw many who sleep in the dust of the earth awaken, some to everlasting life, others to everlasting shame. But most of all, he saw the future sealed. "Shut up the words, Daniel," the voice said. "Seal the book until the time of the end." And so the prophet, who had once interpreted the dreams of emperors, now received a vision too holy to explain, too vast to unfold, reserved not even for his generation, but for ours. He stood silent. He had asked, "What shall be the end of these things?" And the answer came not in detail but in destiny. "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end." It was the most humbling response a prophet could receive. Daniel would not see the Messiah come. He would not witness the restoration of Jerusalem. He would not stand when the final abomination defiled the sanctuary. But he was told one thing: "You shall rest and rise at the end of the days." And that was enough. No throne, no grand farewell, no monument of gold, just a promise that his faithfulness had been written in the scrolls of heaven, and when the earth's final hour came, he would rise. And so, Daniel returned home from the river. No one knows how many more days passed. He likely walked his garden again, the same paths where he once prayed 3 times a day despite the threat of death. Perhaps he looked out across the rooftops of the Persian city and remembered the dreams, the fires, the lions, the handwriting on the wall. His final hours are hidden from us. Scripture closes its curtain here. No grave is recorded, no weeping crowd. But perhaps, just perhaps, his departure was as quiet as his arrival in Babylon so many decades ago. And when the time came, perhaps heaven opened once more, not with chariots or flame, but with a whisper of light. And the one who had seen beasts and angels, who had fasted and wept, who had stood firm in palaces of pride and walked unharmed through a world of lions, was gently taken home, not with applause, but with honor known only to the courts of heaven. His scrolls remained, sealed, his words preserved, his name whispered among the holy, and far above the stars, the king whom Daniel served in silence welcomed him, not as a slave or exile, but as a friend who kept the secrets of God. And so, the story does not end, because somewhere, beyond the rivers of time and the veil of mortality, Daniel waits for his lot, for the end of the days, and for the rise of the everlasting kingdom he foresaw so long ago. Profound moral lessons from the life of Daniel. 1. Unshakable conviction inspires divine favor. When Daniel refused the king's food, he wasn't being picky. He was proving that his loyalty to God came before comfort, popularity, or survival. In a world that pressures compromise, God honors those who take a stand for what's right, even in quiet places. Lesson: even small decisions made in private can shape your spiritual destiny. 2. God positions the faithful in strategic places. Daniel didn't chase power, yet he was promoted to one of the highest offices in Babylon. Why? Because God places his people in the right rooms to influence kings and nations. He doesn't need you to be famous, just faithful. Lesson: when you walk with integrity, God opens doors no man can shut. 3. Your gifts can become God's voice to the world. Daniel's ability to interpret dreams wasn't a party trick. It was a divine assignment. He used his God-given wisdom not for pride, but to reveal heaven's message to earthly rulers. What you carry inside of you might be someone else's breakthrough. Lesson: steward your gifts well. They're not just for you. They're for God's glory. 4. Real faith doesn't flinch in the face of fire or lions. Whether it was a fiery furnace or a den of lions, Daniel and his friends didn't back down. Their obedience didn't guarantee comfort, it guaranteed a miracle. Sometimes, the miracle isn't the absence of the storm, but God's presence in it. Lesson: fear may roar, but faith stands tall, because God shows up where courage lives. 5. Pride leads to a fall, but humility opens heaven. Nebuchadnezzar's downfall wasn't just political, it was spiritual. Daniel didn't just interpret dreams. He warned kings to humble themselves. And when they didn't, God reminded them who really rules the world. Lesson. Stay humble. God lifts up the lowly and brings down the proud. 6. God is not silent, he still reveals the future to the faithful. Daniel was trusted with visions that stretched across centuries, because his heart was pure and his prayer life unshakable. In a time of confusion and chaos, he still heard from heaven. Lesson. If you seek him consistently, God will reveal mysteries others never hear. Brief prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for the unshakable faith of Daniel, a man who stood strong in a world that tried to bend him. Help me to be courageous like him, to honor you even when it's hard, and to trust that you are always in control. Give me wisdom in confusion, boldness in fear, and peace in the face of pressure. May I stand firm in my faith, no matter where life takes me. In Jesus' name, amen. You followed Daniel through exile, fire, and the mouths of lions, but the best is still to come. If you're still watching, you're part of a rare group that loves truth wrapped in suspense. Hit that subscribe button now and join our growing community here at Bible Tales Capes, where God's Word becomes a world you can see.